By the magic of Mull, they mean the scenery, the remnants of history, both in practice and otherwise. They mean the animals. The St. Clair family were known as vessel bearers, indicating the trust that they had earned of the royal family. And the Rosslyn Chapel, well, the Protestant Reformation did afflict that a little bit. The Carnassary Castle is important because it never went under any rebuilding after the 1600s. So a person could see what castles were like before they became not so much of a defense because of the explosives and all. That became just too common. And as fortified as it looked, it was really just a home of luxury. The practice of wearing a kilt may not be as old as people think. There were pants that people wore, and you could definitely tell the men's dress from the women's dress. Women tended to wrap over, and men tended to have, the sort of cap that's stereotypical. The Knights Templar are probably said to have taken part in more battles than they actually took part in. Back in the day, people were just fine eating plain oats. Archibald Armstrong did an interesting move, whether it was authentic or not, that facing execution, he said that, "Oh, I've heard of the Bible. Get me a copy so I can read some for my soul." And because King James was supposedly religious, he couldn't refuse this, so gave him a chance, and he, evidently made his way up after that. And when it comes to the past, there's a lot of fires, a lot of moisture, whether it's floods or leaks or just moist climate, that gets rid of a lot of records. Now, races do exist. That's not saying that you can't race mix, although that shouldn't really be the point, now should it? But, there's features that exist of people living in certain areas over certain times. And I do not take the listing of Charles Darwin of 54 races. I think the 19 makes more sense because he divides the Teutonic or Celtic or Germanic or however you're going to define that Northwestern European group. He divides that into like most of the races, doesn't he? Of course, that was more his culture, so you recognize, oh, over here their nose is a little this and their ears a little this and and there are pure racial types of pretty much every group that exists. Now, it's said that a war amidst 5 other tribes, the Scottish are 4 tribes and the Irish are 1 tribe. If you look back at its most ancient, the Hindus are 4 tribes and the Persians 1 tribe. For example, if you look over there, you could also form some distinctions between the tribes that really you have sort of the same race. But anyways, over in the Afghanistan area, there was a 20th race that had been discovered a couple decades ago, but they think it died out in the middle of that war. But racial and tribal differences in themselves don't necessarily make anybody superior or inferior. So people need to drop that confusion that racial and racist is the same thing. I will talk about whatever culture, whether it's my own or not. If I consider something worth my time to employ, I'll do some of that too. Cultural appropriation is just fine. In fact, the Northwestern Europeans, they were so blended that there's questions. Were they Celt? Were they Germanic? Or it's just like over in the Hindu Kush Himalayan area over towards Iran and stuff, there becomes some issues which term you're going to use for people. The remains around the River Nairn are such that a person gets an idea of time. And a lot of people are visiting some sites just like they used to only visit Stonehenge and a couple other ancient megalithic sites like that. And some of them aren't big stones. There is a Skye's Young Gaelic Person of the Year award that's given out. And there's work in the Scottish Parliament to try to preserve some of the language and such. Now, it seems that family reunions might be a tradition of the Scottish and Irish and that sort of stuff. Or maybe just Northwestern Europeans. Because other cultures, not only do they not really compete in that aspect of it, they'll hold a wedding, whether they're inviting other than family or not, and turn it into a ritual or whatever. But just the sake of a big family gathering, to have a big family gathering and reunite possibly more than the local group. Yeah, that does seem sort of unique. Correct me if I'm wrong. I just don't notice anything. Martin Tagney developed a car that could run on whiskey. And I don't know, isn't that more expensive than regular gasoline? Or it depends on the efficiency of the car running on whiskey too. So, and of course, the Highland Games, the skills that would be needed on the land, the stuff related to woodworking and stuff like that. So I've been to some of that stuff before. And yeah, they have different sorts of haggis, the sheep intestine, obviously cleaned out and stuffed. Some would be for ceremony, some are just for food. So there's like an art to it, and you got to know what you're doing. Well, the corporate issue might be a good reason to have variety in even stuff like distilleries, whether you believe that alcohol consumption is okay or right or wrong or whatever you believe about that. At least the aspect of handing everything over to a handful of corporations might not be the best idea. So preserving that aspect of culture has its value there. 2017 had a record number of Nessie sightings, from the Loch Ness. And so people are saying, the odds of there not being a monster are being reduced. But let's be real about this. Fornias and other, Foras? Other things from the Goetia and some other grimoires and such. Oh, didn't Crowley have a property on the of the Loch Ness at some point. I say it's real, but it's spiritual. And if not spiritual, it's at least something psychological that lingers. Goblin Ha might be a good place to visit and do a ritual. People believe it has a history of that, particularly evil rituals. Finds from Darcy Hoard show work in silver and such going back 1700 years, and some of these pieces can be distinguished as relating to different places or cultures. At Edinburgh Castle and other places, there are ceremonies that honor the history of the military and some other such things. And there are particular vessels and stuff that appear in some of these ceremonies. And as I've said on other programs, a lot of what has happened has been secularized and Christianized. But a lot of these traditions of particular coronations and affirmations and memorial days and all that other stuff, they come from something older than Christianity. Some say there are about 2,500 castles in Scotland. Now, a reason that makes buying a magazine like this worthwhile is references to the clan guilds that you can join related to your ancestors. And a lot of these have allowed for adopted spellings, not just one spelling of a last name. Brooches, patterns, and materials can be how to distinguish one family from another. Certainly military ranks and stuff like this can be shown by particular pins and stuff that people wear. There's a dictionary you can look up. Jarlshof, South Mainland, Shetland, and other sites confirm that as this modern age goes on, there will be more discovered about the past and sites used for different purposes. And more will be known about some of these sites as technology and unexpected discoveries upon just even reviewing will do.